Okay, so Sony have released 3 new lenses in their APS-C lineup, which is really quite exciting because it's something we haven't seen for a little while. We've got 2 prime lenses and 1 zoom, and all of them are nice and small, all nice and compact and light, as you'd expect from an APS-C lens. Now, we got to test all 3 of these out, admittedly on a pretty tight time frame, but let's get into exactly what we've got here. So we've got the ultra-wide 11mm f1.8 lens, which works out with a full frame equivalent to be about 16.5mm. We've got a 15mm f1.4 G lens, which again with the full frame equivalent works out to be about 22.5mm. And then we've got the zoom, a 10 to 20mm f4 G lens, which is a power zoom as well. And this is essentially the APS-C equivalent of the 16 to 35 f4 power zoom lens that we saw recently for Sony for full frame cameras. Now, I've been testing these out with the Sony a6600 as well as the ZV-E10, and they all pair up really well with those cameras. They all have certain design elements in common, chief among them being that lightweight and small design, perfect for APS-C. So let's start off by talking about the 11mm f1.8 lens. Now, this is the widest fixed lens for Sony's APS-C cameras, and with a nice fast aperture, this has a lot of uses. So pairing this up with either the a6600 or the ZV-E10, it's an ideal vlogging lens. And we even see suppressed focus breathing, both digitally and optically, which is great for content creators, so you don't get that slight zoom when adjusting focus. Now, of course, it's a useful all-round wide-angle prime for photography and videography alike. The optical quality is good, and you can certainly use this for things like landscape, architectural, even something like street photography as well. And of course, content creators are going to find this very, very useful. It's a very capable lens for video, and that nice fast aperture is certainly going to help with low light. It is a plastic design, but it actually feels pretty good. It doesn't have a flimsy feel, and in terms of controls, it's nice and minimal. Just the focus hold button, the AF/MF switch, and the focus ring. A great, reasonably priced option as a fast wide-angle lens. Now, next up, we've got the 15mm f1.4 G lens. So not quite as wide, but a faster aperture. And as a G lens, as I'm sure you can imagine, the optical quality is absolutely fantastic. It's a little bit bigger than the 11mm, but that seems fair enough with that faster f1.4 aperture. Now, this is also great for a lot of the same things as the 11mm. There's certainly a bit of a crossover here, but you could certainly still use this as a vlogging option. But with the f1.4 aperture and slightly tighter focal length, you're getting a little bit more separation between you and the background, a little bit more of a shallow depth of field feel. The bokeh here is lovely, it's nice and smooth, and that overall image quality, whether you're shooting photo or video, is wonderful, which I was kind of expecting from a G lens. It's nice and sharp, no issues with vignetting, just a lovely image. Now, the autofocus is super quick here, and it never missed. Not something that I'm particularly surprised about when it comes to Sony. That's kind of what I would expect now, but that's partly thanks to 2 linear motors, making it very quiet as well. And there really is minimal focus breathing here as well, something which is very important, as I imagine this will be used for video quite a bit. It's also worth noting the minimum close focusing distance here is 17 centimeters with manual focus and 20 centimeters with autofocus, which lets you get in nice and close to your subject. Now, design-wise, it's still nice and compact, it's lightweight, we've still got that focus hold button, the AF/MF switch, but on the 15mm, we've also got an aperture ring and a click and declick switch. Now, I always love an aperture ring on a lens. I think it's a great thing to have, and it really helps further differentiate this from the 11mm. The 15mm f1.4 really feels like a step up from that 11mm, where that was maybe the more affordable option. This feels like maybe the more premium option. You've got that faster aperture, the optical quality is really good, and the design feels a little bit more premium with things like that aperture ring. Now, last but certainly not least, we have the 10 to 20mm f4G power zoom lens. This is absolutely the APS-C version of that 16 to 35 f4G power zoom lens we saw recently for full frame cameras. It has a very similar full frame equivalent focal range, and with that power zoom, it's able to achieve the same results. It's actually the world's smallest and lightest f4 zoom APS-C lens, and this pairs really well with the ZV-E10 in particular, but as well as the a6600 as well. It just feels so good on the front of those cameras in terms of weight and size, and it really feels like a perfect companion to the ZV-E10. It's certainly able to be a great vlogging lens at 10mm, but it's so versatile with that focal range out to a full frame equivalent of around 30mm. Now optically this is great, the sharpness is good all the way to the edge, which you could probably expect from an f4G lens like this, but you've also got 2 linear motors here as well for the autofocus, so it's nice and quick as well as quiet, which is always useful. We see the same optical suppression of focus breathing here as well, great for content creators and videographers. Now we talked about the possibilities of the power zoom in the 16-35 f4G power zoom video, but it allows you to get a constant stable zoom while filming, which is always really useful. Generally I'll add something like that in post because of how difficult it is to get a smooth zoom manually, but this makes it a lot easier, which opens up some really creative possibilities. Things like the dolly zoom effect, where you zoom in or out and physically move the camera in the opposite direction to keep your subject the same size in the frame, but change the perspective and the background around it, something that's a lot easier to do in camera with a power zoom like this. Now in terms of design, it's very small, it's light, which is great. The focus ring and the zoom ring are equally sized and both quite small, something which at first I thought I wouldn't like, but actually the way Sony have implemented the feel of them, they actually are really comfortable to use. The grip on the rings is fantastic. Now, of course, we've got that focus hold button as well as the AF/MF switch, but we've also got the rocker switch for the power zoom as well. So you've got the option of either the zoom ring or the switch. Now, all 3 lenses have something to offer. You have the more affordable wide-angle prime, the more premium 15mm f1.4G lens, and then the zoom as well, which is a really good staple zoom. It's great that the APS-C side of things is getting some attention, and if you shoot with something like the a6600, the a6400, the ZV-E10, these are some awesome lenses to check out. Now you can check out all 3 lenses by following the links down in the description. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe for new content all the time. I'll be seeing you in the next video, but until then, as always, thanks for watching.